Hi, this is Ron Turner of Frontrunner 2020. Thank you for joining episode 3 of our series. Before we start the program, let me say a few words about our purpose. We launched the Frontrunner 2020 series to support and encourage those on the journey towards elected office. We aim to present relevant programming for those aspiring to run so you can lay the groundwork and be prepared. In addition, some of our presentations are focused on strategies and tactics for use during your campaign. Our guests are the best in their field, and in some specialties, this means going outside of politics to the business community. You'll see that we emphasize marketing and building your brand as a core strategic component. There are many things you can do before you announce your candidacy that will enhance your potential and eliminate roadblocks that may get in your way. Finally, we recognize this path as a matter of personal growth and, yes, a calling. Please tell us what you need to be more successful, and we'll plan future programs around your feedback. What fundraising technique would you prefer to rely on most? Events, mail, online, candidate call time, or magic fairies? I kind of like that last one. I'll repeat the question. What fundraising technique would you prefer to rely on most? Events, mail, online, candidate call time, or magic fairies?
Well, again, we have realists in the audience again, Ron. Call time, candidate call time is the number one most efficient way to do fundraising. Events play a role and online plays a role, but these are really just ways to execute on candidate call time. Fundamentally, fundraising, you have to actually ask for the money. You have to actually make a solicitation. And the best solicitation is always personal and direct. And there's no better way to be personal and direct than to have the candidate actually on the phone, one-on-one, building that relationship with that potential donor. And it's also the most efficient way to do it. But when you're going to get on the phone as a candidate, you're going to find that you're going to, on just about every single call, be confronted either directly or implicitly with the most important question of any campaign, and that is, why are you running? Donors want to know that you are running with a clear purpose, that you're intentional about your efforts, and that you have a heart. And ultimately, it's the answer to that question, an honest, direct, straightforward, bare bones answer to that question that is compelling and authentic, that is going to make those candidate calls successful.
You know what? Every person that we have had on this program talks about that point from some angle. Josh Berthume in episode 1 was talking about messaging and social media and emphasizing that you have to know why you're doing this and what your mission is in order to communicate effectively. And likewise in episode 2, Nancy Lloyd was talking about that as well, is that before someone even runs, they need to know why they're running.
Yeah, this is the reason why candidate phone calls are among the most efficient ways to do it, because when you're in that clear space of knowing who you are and being able to communicate it, there's no better connection that can be made with a potential donor. Nothing else can do as well. You need the other parts. You need some fundraising. You need some fundraisers. You need some events. You need some people out raising money and beating the bushes for you. In fact, the way to make that work best is to have good relationships between the candidate and the person who's out beating the bushes, where the candidate is holding that person accountable on a regular basis. You need the mail. You need the emails. You need good online social presence. But at the core, you need all that to fundamentally support what's happening with a candidate on the phones, building relationships one by one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ready for step 4?
Absolutely, because the natural segue here is that it's building relations one by one. In other words, a candidate has got to get on the phone and ask people for money, and then you have to repeat that. Volume matters. If you Think back to that formula of planning cash flow, of working through a list of contacts, targeting every single person, right? And then measuring cash flow by breaking down those numbers. If you need $100,000 in targets to raise $20,000, you're also going to need to get $40,000 in pledges to get to that $20,000. If you're going to accumulate $40,000 in pledges, you really have to talk to a large number of people, or try to talk to a large number of people. You have to ask a lot of people, and you are going to get a lot of no's. It's got to be the candidate on the phone, but look, there needs to be somebody else there with a candidate, and that's the only way you can maintain the consistent volume that needs to happen. I mean, this is hard stuff. On every call, you need to put your whole heart into it so you can make that true and authentic relationship stick with the person that you're talking to. And on, as many as 9 out of 10 calls, you're going to end up with a no, or worse, some kind of vague substitute for a no, which doesn't even, break it to you that there's never going to be anything there, that holds out the possibility. You need somebody else there as emotional support, as a coach. I mean, just to help you keep going and keep picking up the phone and stay focused. But you also need someone there to pick up all the small tasks, or not the small tasks, the very important tasks, but the things that would distract you from continuing making phone calls. Like after the good call, when the person says, yes, I'll give you $1,000, send me a link to your campaign website so I can do that, or send me the address. You need to go on and the candidate needs to get back on the phone and call another person while somebody else helps by doing the follow-up. And that's an important role for somebody to help a candidate. And that can be a staff member, or that can be a close and trusted friend, but it needs to be someone who can help the candidate also be able to pick up that call again, pick up the phone again and make the next call. And then step 5 is another role for this person to help, for someone who can help the candidate, the assistant, or the close friend. Someone needs to measure what's going on. The hardest thing to do as a candidate is to stick to scheduled call time. But the most important thing to do in a campaign is to schedule call time and stick to it. Many times I've set up an assistant with a stopwatch to measure call time.
Wow.
Because when we talk about having call time, we're not just talking about being there in the room with the intention of calling. We actually mean live time on the phone.
I can personally vouch for that, Scott, because at different times, I have to make sales calls, and I have lived everything you're saying, where my desk is so clean and every pencil is sharp, and the 2 hours that I had entered into Outlook as being dedicated to outbound calling has elapsed, and my list is very well organized of who I'm going to call when the next 2-hour allotment comes up, and I'm really ready then.
Oh, absolutely. So if everything else is going to distract you, everything else can distract us from making call time. That's the same way as you talked about. Making sales calls is the same kind of way. So you've got to have somebody else to help do all the other pieces. Count everything that can be counted. How many attempted calls? How many hours you called for? How many calls you attempted to dial? How many calls you completed? Counting, summing up the total dollar amount of the specific pledges. And then the next part of measurement is to take all those things you can count and track the ratios between them. A basic key to fundraising is just to watch those ratios and try to improve from day to day. Just try to make a few more calls each hour. Try to complete a few more calls each hour. Try to increase the dollar amount of pledges at the end of each call session. And just try to get better and better from moment to moment, and watch your plan. Action.
Here we go. Tell them about it, Scott.
All right. So now this is a real, this is a bit of a math problem, and you might want to break out Excel to do it. I actually toyed around with it a little bit just to make sure it's easy. It's doable. I shouldn't say easy. But as an exercise, construct a plan to raise $20,000 in 30 days. That's a fairly modest number, and you'll see how the numbers break down. If you assume, and for the exercise, what I'd suggest you do is assume an average target. In other words, just assume you have a list in which everybody who you might target is targeted at $250. So you want to call everybody on this list and ask them for $250 for the campaign. Assume we have a standard conversion rate from targets to pledges, that about 1/3 of the people on that list, you actually get through to them and get them to make a pledge of $250 on average. And assume that those pledges will come in and become deposits at about 60%. In other words, we're talking about our rough 1/5 rule of thumb. And so then the question is, assuming those three facts, how many calls do you need to make? And then assume you can make 20 calls an hour, how many hours of call time do you need to schedule? So this is a fairly straightforward exercise to go through and figure out those numbers. And obviously, I think the numbers will, may surprise some. They may be pretty straightforward to others, but I think I would suggest that the next thing to ask is, do you think you can make 20 calls in an hour? And if not, you might play with those numbers a little bit with some scenarios about different rates of calling. If there's anybody in the audience who has an experience doing call time, you might start measuring calls per hour and get a sense of how that affects how your planning and cash flow projection would work. And finally, thank you. Thank all of you for being here. Thank you, Ron, for having me on the program. Delighted to have an opportunity to talk about fundraising. It's something I've spent a lot of my career working on and doing, and I find it's a simple thing. It's fundamentally about relationships, and so the most important, I think the most important part of fundraising is that very last step of remembering to thank your donors and say thank you for what they've done to help you. So
well, isn't that a good? It's my pleasure. You're very welcome. Thank you for giving the presentation. And really, isn't that a good way to approach life in general?
I think so. Yeah.
I sure do.